Part I. The arrival in the heart of a quiet, rain-soaked town, nestled among the Welsh Hills, a manor stood abandoned. Locals referred to it only in hushed whispers, Evershade Hall. Built in the 1800s by an eccentric clockmaker named Alastair Marrow, the mansion had earned a strange reputation, not for the usual ghosts or creaking doors, but for one room at the top of the west wing, sealed and untouched for decades. They called it the room where time stands still. Nobody remembered who had last been inside it. The door was locked from the inside, and despite several attempts over the years, no one had been able to break in. The air around it was said to shimmer faintly, like heat waves on a summer road, except this shimmer came regardless of weather. Some said you could hear faint ticking from within, not mechanical, but more organic, like the pulse of a living heart. One particularly drizzly October, Evelyn Crowe arrived in town. A historian with a passion for the unexplained, Evelyn had heard about Evershade through a rare reference in a Victorian-era diary she'd come across at a London estate sale. The author, a maid named Lillian Hartwell, described a terrible incident in 1873, when half the household staff fled the house in the dead of night. The final entry read, "They should never have built that room. I fear what it contains, for time itself weeps there." Something about that phrase stuck with Evelyn. She knew she had to see the room for herself. She arrived with little more than her research notes, a change of clothes, and her trusty Canon camera. The townspeople were polite, but cagey. No one offered to guide her to the mansion. In fact, they seemed to avoid mentioning it at all, their expressions stiffening at the name, Evershade. The path leading to the house was overgrown and slick with moss. Ivy had claimed much of the exterior, and a black iron gate stood rusted, one hinge dangling loosely. Evelyn pushed it open with a screech that echoed like a scream through the surrounding woods. The front door yielded easily, revealing a grand, dust-shrouded foyer. Despite years of abandonment, the house held an eerie stillness, as if its contents had simply paused. "Time stands still," she murmured, her breath visible in the strangely cold air. Part 2. The Discoverite West Wing was partially collapsed, forcing Evelyn to take a circuitous route through the servants' quarters and a hidden corridor lined with clocks, dozens of them, all stopped at 3:33 a.m. She reached the top of the staircase by dusk. The hallway was silent, save for a low hum that seemed to come from behind the final door at the end. It was a heavy oak thing, bound with iron bands. A faded placard hung crookedly on it, bearing just one word, "Observatory." Odd, she thought. There were no windows on that side of the house. Evelyn tried the handle. It didn't budge. She inspected the frame for weaknesses, but found none. She even considered using her crowbar, but hesitated. Something about the room made her uneasy. Instead, she set up camp in the hallway. She would try again in the morning. That night, her dreams were vivid. Disjointed flashes of a man in a long coat, faces frozen in terror, clocks melting into pools of mercury. She awoke gasping, drenched in sweat, though the corridor was icy cold. The humming had grown louder. By noon the next day, she'd uncovered a crawlspace through a linen closet in the adjacent hall. It led to a narrow maintenance shaft running along the edge of the west wing. Rat bones littered the passage, and mold curled in damp corners. She reached a vent, pried it open with a grunt, and peered inside. There it was. The observatory. Part 3. The room where time stands still. What she saw defied logic. The room looked untouched, a round chamber with a domed ceiling, painted in constellations that shimmered faintly. A massive orrery dominated the center, planets spinning with impossible smoothness, though she saw no motors. Books floated a few inches above a desk. A clock without hands stood on the far wall, ticking. But most unsettling of all was the figure in the chair. A man sat hunched over a journal, unmoving. He wore a Victorian suit, his hair streaked with gray, his skin pale as bone. He should have been dust, and yet, he looked perfectly preserved. There was no rot, no decay. His eyes were open. Evelyn shivered. A strange force tugged at her chest, like gravity reversed. Time was different here. The seconds felt thicker, as if moving through syrup. She entered the room. Her camera instantly shut off. The door she had pried open via the vent snapped shut behind her. Part 4. The journal lay open in the man's lap. Evelyn approached cautiously, half expecting him to blink. He didn't. The writing inside was meticulous, pages upon pages of entries dating from 1872 to 1873. The last entry read, "Time is not a river but a circle. I have seen its tail bite its head. In this room, control it no longer. It controls me." Then, in shaky script, "I made a mistake." Evelyn flipped further back and read of experiments in temporal resonance, frequency manipulation, and time bubbles, areas where the flow of time could be altered by precise oscillations. Alastair Marrow had designed the room as an observatory not of space, but of time itself. The clocks, the orbiting models, the constellations, they were all tools. Somewhere in his experiments, he had triggered a collapse, a self-sustaining bubble where time moved at a crawl. For him, only moments had passed. For the world outside, nearly 150 years. Evelyn was trapped. Part V. The Akosthi realization sank like a stone in her stomach. The door would not open. Her phone battery drained in seconds. She could still breathe, but the air felt charged, like just before a storm. And then, the whispering began. Not voices, but echoes. Recordings of moments that had happened inside the room. She heard Alastair pacing, muttering formulas. She heard music. A woman crying, a child laughing, but none of them were there, just phantoms of time, replaying in loops. She tried to sleep, but time within the room made even that uncertain. Her body told her hours had passed, but her watch hadn't moved. Hunger gnawed at her, and the shadows deepened, though the lights never dimmed. Eventually, she noticed changes. The man in the chair Alastair had moved. Not much. A slight shift in the angle of his head. Another day, his fingers curled around the journal. He was alive. Or something like it. Evelyn approached, speaking gently. His lips parted. No sound came. She placed her hand on his, and the room shuddered. Part VI. The collapse suddenly. The ticking stopped. The clocks on the wall all spun wildly, then froze again. At 3:33, the floating books crashed to the floor. The orrery sparked, its planets shattering in a burst of golden light. A low vibration pulsed through the room. Like a heartbeat, Evelyn fell to her knees. A fissure opened in the wall, revealing what looked like stars, a void of undulating blackness speckled with light. The room wasn't just out of time, it had become unmoored from reality. Alastair stood up. He moved slowly, as if learning how to walk again. His eyes met hers, and in them, she saw madness, sorrow, and something else, hope. He pointed toward the void. "This is the exit," he said, "but only one can leave." Part 7. The Shoysith room quaked, dust falling from the ceiling. Evelyn backed away. "What do you mean?" Alastair looked young now, the years melting off him like wax. "This bubble was designed to hold one soul. The balance cannot be broken. I can leave or you can, but not both." She looked into the void. It beckoned, stars spinning in patterns her mind could barely process. "Why now?" she asked. "Because you broke the seal," he whispered. "You gave the room a new focus." She looked at the journal, then at him. If she stayed, she would be like him, suspended in a moment forever. No aging, no pain, no escape. If she left, she would bring his knowledge to the world. But something deep inside warned her. The knowledge he held could be dangerous. She made her choice. Part 8. The world beyond Evelyn stepped into the void. Pain lanced through her, a tearing sensation as her body was pulled through 1,000 possibilities at once. She glimpsed other rooms, other timelines, versions of herself, old, young, happy, broken. Then silence. She awoke in the woods, just outside Evershade. The manor was gone. No ruins. No path. Just trees. Her watch read 3:33. Epilogue. The book back in London, Evelyn compiled her notes into a manuscript titled, The Room Where Time Stands Still. She debated publishing it, fearing what might happen if others tried to recreate Marrow's work. But before she could decide, the book vanished from her desk. In its place was a single page, handwritten, "Time is not a river, it is a door," and someone, somewhere, a always listening.